May it please the court, counsel, co-counsel, Daniel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good afternoon. First thing I want to do is thank each and every one of you for being here. We know it was a sacrifice, but as I told you on Bodire, we also believe that you're here not so much because it's a recognition of your civic duty, but we believe you're here so that justice can be served in this courtroom. And I told you from the very beginning that's all I wanted you to do, is to serve justice in this courtroom. Let me tell you what I find interesting about this jury. The 12 of you combined, no disrespect to the alternate, but you won't be deliberating, you have 703 years of life experiences among you. You have 171 years of formal education between all of you. We have 2 educators. We have 2 professional drivers. We have a school monitor, an IT specialist, and as my wife says, a domestic engineer, an entrepreneur, somebody who works in sales, a lending institution, healthcare, and retired. A cross-section of the community. We could not ask for a better jury. That's what it's all about, the jury of our peers. We thank you sincerely for your call and for coming here and listening to this case. You know, we talked about in Bodire about can you follow the law. We had a lot of propositions of law that we spoke about, a lot of different concepts, presumption of innocence, burden of proof. Each and every one of you indicated that you would follow the law, that you would hold the presumption of innocence to Daniel. That could not be. You would hold it all the way through the trial until the state overcome each and every element of the offense beyond all reasonable doubt. That's the oath that you took. And we're going to hold you on that oath. We're going to ask you to do that. My job here today is really an easy job. My job here today is really to summarize the evidence for you. And to help you do that, I'm going to go over the exhibits and I'm going to go over the witnesses. My canvas will be the witnesses. And my exhibits will be the witness statements, and the exhibit will be my pen and my paper, will be my pen. It's going to lay it all out for you. And let's see what picture it paints. And let's see what it was the state proved. I'm going to tell you all that I believe, from listening to the evidence, that they never reached anywhere near their burden of proof. And when I summarize the evidence, if I misstate any of the evidence, I assure you I have not done so intentionally. And if there is a difference between your recollection of the evidence and my recollection of the evidence, then you are to be governed by your 12 collective wisdom and minds as to what did you hear and how did you perceive it. Because that's what's important. The collective wisdom of all 12 of you. Who did the state call? They called 15 witnesses and 51 exhibits. So you determine how much of those exhibits had evidentiary value and the importance of each and every one of those exhibits. And let's go over all of the witnesses that they called, the 15 witnesses. First witnesses was Raul Prieto. He was the second officer at the scene. When he got there, he understood what was going on. He parked his vehicle. He wanted to make sure to preserve the integrity of the crime scene. He said that he didn't make a report. Didn't document anything that he saw. Found Armando Lazo in front of the Gorham's home, 10,000 Oakwood, where he was laying there. EMS was already treating him. He said that it was very dark, and he found the 6 shell casings right outside the street. He was the one that found that. And he understood the importance of that and preserved that for the IDNR, the forensic team that's charged with collecting evidence. He said he was there, and then he felt a tap on his shoulder, and 2 young men approached him. And that's when who later identified as Juan Medina and Jesse Hernandez, and found out that, who are you? What do you all want? We have 2 friends. We were here at the shooting. Goes, who's your friend? And then Jesse, of course, points out Armando Lasso. Raul Prieto said that he saw Armando Lasso was unconscious. And then he said, there's another one. Where's the other one? Well, he was over here. And he points him in the direction, and they find Robert England. And then he immediately realizes, Raul Prieto, as a good officer, he immediately realizes that, they may be witnesses. Let's separate them. Let's separate them to make sure that they don't collaborate with anything, with any information. And he put one in one patrol car. I think he said Officer Bellows was there, showed up, and he put the other individual in Officer Bellows' car. I don't believe he said if he put it, if Juan Medina was in his car or in Officer Bellows, and I think he said he thought he had taken Juan Medina down to CAP. That was all the first witness testified to. The second witness was Nancy Gorham, and Mr. and Mrs. Gorham, and the third witness was Mr. Gorham, and they have since passed away. But you read or you heard their testimony, their sworn testimony, and they basically said that they lived at 10,000 Oakwood. They heard 5 or 6 shots. As she was about to look out the window, she heard a frantic knocking on the door, told her husband to open the door, and she called 911. And what was stipulated, not contested, that at 12:18 is when she made the call. The 911 call came in, 12:18 in the morning. And that was all that Mr. and Mrs. Gorham testified to. The fourth witness was Hector Hernandez, the crime scene technician. You remember him? What was his job? His job was to collect evidence. That's what his job was to do. But to collect evidence, you must look for evidence. And he told you that he did this crime scene diagram. And when they asked him about, well, the Gorham's home is here where you have all this legend here. And he told you, he goes, yes, I did. He goes, what did you do? He goes, well, I looked around here. We saw the video. You saw the video of that desert area. Make sure we put the placards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shell casings. Couldn't find any other evidence. But he never looked at any other place. He never went to the front of the home. He never looked to where Armando Lasso was laying, where he bled, before they took him to the hospital. He never went there. He never looked for any evidence, he said. He left half of the crime scene without investigating. And that was his job, to collect evidence. And to collect evidence, you must look for evidence. Because they're making a theory now that all of a sudden Daniel or somebody ran over there. Did they find any shell casings? Well, he said, we didn't look. We know from the Gorman's testimony, they heard 5 or 6 shots. We know the physical evidence shows there were 6 shots. We also know from the physical evidence that contradicts their theory, where he said that all of a sudden, according to Daniel, when he had shot, that he'd gone back, chased him down, that he recognized Mando. There was a lapse of time. Nobody testified a lapse of time. Juan Medina testified there were consecutive shots when they took off running. So Mr. Hernandez, and I even asked him, I said, well, what do you do? How are you instructed? Well, CAP officers tell us, what they would like to do. So did you have an opportunity? How long were you there? Oh, about 4 or 5 hours. Could you have gone back? Yes, I could. Did you go back? No, I didn't. Did you care? Yeah, I think he said he cared. But he didn't go back to look for any evidence. And he said he had an opportunity to go back, and he didn't do it. Their fifth witness is Gerald Humphries. He said he's the one who took photographs at the autopsy and in other locations. And he said that 20 photos in his camera weren't developed because the camera malfunctioned. And he said his job wasn't to determine why it malfunctioned. He just knows it malfunctioned. So they lost, or we have a spoliation of evidence issue because it wasn't preserved. The medical examiner took some photographs, and that's why you have those photographs of the medical examiner. Because Humphrey tried to say, no, I did take some photographs. But then when I reminded him in his own written statement where he says, didn't your statement say that the photographs you took, the 20 photographs you took, the camera malfunctioned and none of them were developed? He says, oh yeah, that's right. And that was all that Mr. Humphries said. And what was interesting that he said, but I did collect the projectile that the medical examiner took from the body. And more than a quarter of a century later, they finally take it and get it analyzed. Over 25 years later, they send it to get it analyzed. The projectile. Think about that. The bullet that they collected in 1993 was said to be analyzed in June of 2018 by them. I can't explain that 25-year lapse. The sixth witness was Jesse Hernandez, a victim that was victimized again in this courtroom by the prosecutor. A victim. Him and his friends were victims. 2 of them were deceased and 2 of them were shot at. And the 2 survivors were both accused of killing their friends. What did Jesse say? We went to a gathering on Jamaica Street. And whether Jesse said, can remember it was at the top end, the bottom end, we Googled where it was, and it was about the middle of Jamaica Street. Then he said they walked down Jamaica Street, went down Trans Mountain Road, went up Electric Street, and then that's when the shots were fired. And he talked about that little cat and mouse game. And it's interesting, that little cat and mouse game in there, that was in the paper in the public domain. So what did they say? He said one thing that was consistent with Jesse and Juan, why did they go down Trans Mountain and not Electric Street? And not, and not Fairbanks? Because that was another person's turf. That was LML gang turf. We wanted to stay away from that turf. We didn't want to go anywhere near that turf. Jesse said that when they're there and they see the car pull up, and you know something's wrong, he's noticed the lights are off, the car pulls up, they think, hey, what's up? And then the shots start firing. And Jesse says he hears a bullet ricochet off the fence and he takes off running. And as he's running, Juan Medina said that Jesse passed him. As he's running, he's running for his life. And he says out of his peripheral vision, he sees the car that's coming. They try to pound all over Jesse about, well, you never mentioned peripheral before. He said the car was running. He may not use the word peripheral, but said the car was running. They're somehow trying to suggest, well, maybe the car wasn't going. But you know what doesn't make sense with that? Armando Lasso, as Mr. Prieto said, would not have run if he got shot the first time. And we know he was shot twice. We know he ran to the Gorhams. And we know he ran in the direction where the casings were. So he ran in the direction where the threat initially came. So that threat was no longer there. That threat had left. So when he went and pounded on the door, nobody went and finished him off. There was never any break in the series, in the shooting. Never a break in the shooting. That was consistent. Jesse said that when he went up to the video up there at the corner of Fairbanks and Electric, when he was hiding by the trash can, Mando shows up, he was scared. He just wanted to go home. And who can blame him? And Mando said, where's Bobby? And Hector, Juan says, where's Bobby? Where's Mando? And Jesse says, I don't know. Juan thought they'd run in the other direction. Because we got to go back. She says, no, let's go home. Let's go home. No, we got to go back. We got to go back. And after a while, and they tried to pin him down, well, how long was it before you went back? He didn't know. He didn't know exactly how long. Not long. After a few minutes, they walked across the street of Electric Street, walked back down. They saw the lights. They saw all the lights of the emergency vehicles. And then what did he do? Went up to the officer, and that's when he tapped him on the shoulder. And then he says that he's go down to the CAP office to give a statement. And the prosecutor really was hard on Jesse about saying, well, you know, you never said it was 76 Caprice back there. You're telling this jury now 25 years later. Remember that? And then all of a sudden, on the second page of his statement, he talks about the 76 Caprice. And then when I get to ask him, they didn't show you the third page. He actually circled and initialed a 76 Caprice. So they're trying to say he was inconsistent when he was consistent. And this is record that's in their file that they know he said it was a 76 Caprice and tried to make Jesse a liar on something as insignificant as a type of vehicle that's in their own file that they can't deny, that they knew what he said, and tried to confuse him, victimizing him again. I don't understand that. It doesn't fit their narrative. It doesn't fit their story. You talk about manipulation of evidence. It's offensive to victimize a victim, to fit your theory and your story. He was just trying to relive what happened. And you saw the terror in his face. And then he talks about, when Detective Marquez talked to him, he says, he told me, I know you did it. Juan already said you did it. Jesse said, what? He goes, yeah, you did it. You did it. You killed your friends. I said, I didn't kill my friends. Yes, you did. We know you did. And Jesse starts shaking. And Juan says he saw Jesse scared and shaking. And then they leave him alone. And what does Jesse say? He started thinking, where did I get the gun? What did I do with the gun? He almost thought, did I kill my friends? I mean, these are 16-year-old boys. David Rangel and Daniel Villegas. This was taken a year after. They were even a year younger than this. They were even a year younger than what they look here. In the hands of a homicide detective, accusing Jesse, who had just been victimized, where Jesse started to think, maybe I did. What did he tell you? I came this close to confessing. And then they blame him for, well, Mr. Hernandez, you've never told, in 94 and 95, you've never told anybody what Detective Marquez said. In 94 and 95, he was very clear. Nobody asked me. Nobody asked me what Marquez did. Nobody asked me. That's what he told you. It is really offensive to try to suggest that Jesse somehow was responsible, or that he's making this up, that Marquez did not really treat him that way. There is no doubt that that boy was terrorized. And then they blame him. Well, did you go to the police and tell them what Marquez told you and accused you and how he treated you? Go to the police. He was at the police. The police are the ones that accused him. But did you go to the DA's office? You know, it's like complaining to Kim Jong-un that you're a dictator and hoping it's going to change. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. How can you expect that to happen? He was terrorized. But he said it was dark out there. Couldn't see who was shooting. You couldn't identify anybody. Their seventh witness is Juan Medina, the other victim. They did bench warrant him from TDC. Whatever problems he has, and he's paying for those problems. But he talked about what happened to him and how he was terrorized. And what did he say? He's told you the same thing that Jesse said about the party, about the cat and mouse with the vehicle, about it was dark, about being shot, about running, thinking Bobby had run the other direction. But you know what was consistent? That when he gets to CAP, that Marquez starts accusing him. I know you did it. He says, I didn't do it, because I know you did it. It's a common theme that you're hearing over and over and over. These are two victims that are telling you what they went through. And how old were they at the time? He said 15, 16, and 17, those boys. You think about that. You think about those of you that have a 16-year-old grandson. You think about in the hands of a detective what they could do. Because they don't have any lead. They're desperate. You heard the evidence. A lot of shootings, big homicide rate, bad gang problems back then, what he talked about. They had pressure to solve it. No physical evidence, no forensic evidence, no scientific evidence, no identification, no eyewitness testimony, no eyewitness identification. They didn't have anything. So when you don't have any evidence, what do? You get somebody to confess. And they just kept going down the line. You got to get somebody to confess. And both of them said, Juan said the same thing. Have you ever testified to this? Juan said, no. Nobody's ever asked me what Marquez did to me. Nobody's ever asked me. That's not their fault. That's not your fault. That's not Daniel's fault. Those are the facts. Their eighth witness, James Kelly, firearm expert. He couldn't tell us the model or make of what the weapon was that shot that projectile, but what he did tell us was that more than a quarter of a century after April 10th of 1993, he was given a projectile to analyze. That's it. He couldn't tell us anything else other than that. Why would they wait almost 25 years to do that? Why would they do that? And then the ninth witness is Dr. Quentin, the medical examiner. Now, Dr. Quentin did not do the autopsy. Somebody else did the autopsy. And you have the autopsy in evidence. And we introduced it. Okay? And why is that important? Well, Dr. Quentin was describing Armando Lasso. I couldn't tell if at first he wasn't sure if he was 5 feet or 8 feet, but he had a little trouble with on the size of the young man. And he got a little confused about the entry wound and the exit wound of the bullet, of the projectile. There's a reason why I introduced it, because I don't want perpetrator fraud on this jury, and I want to make sure you have the right evidence. Because he initially told you that the entry wound was in the back, and not the front. That's what he told you. Well, Dr. Quentin, that's really not what he says. And I couldn't really understand what he was saying, but what's real clear and what's in evidence, if you read the description of the entry wound by the medical examiner that did the autopsy, it's real clear. And if you have trouble reading it, pictures will tell you. And the picture is very clear. Bullet entry wound in the front. And why is that important? You know, it's interesting that they didn't call the medical examiner who actually did the autopsy report, because he would have told us that the entry wound was in the front. Because their narrative is that Daniel chased him down and shot him in the back. So they want to tell you the bullet wound was in the back. Dr. Quentin tried to tell you the bullet wound went into the back and out the front. And that fits their narrative. But the physical evidence does not fit their narrative. The medical evidence does not fit their narrative. The medical evidence tells you it was in the front. And when they try to say, well, how did that have happened? Heard of a ricochet? I mean, that bullets are being shot at. You can't tell. They couldn't tell the angle. Even the firearm expert, you couldn't tell the position of the weapon. Because there are many factors. Bending over, laying down, running, ricochet, all sorts of things. They want you to guess. They want you to speculate. They want you to do for them what the evidence has failed to do. That's not your job. Your job is to render a true verdict based on the evidence and the facts. That's the oath you took. That's the oath I'm asking you to do. Go on. Dr. Quentin's a nice man, but he got it wrong. The evidence tells you that. And why would they bring a medical examiner to tell you something different? Maybe because they didn't introduce the autopsy report, thought you'd get away with it.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. This is improper. He knows I couldn't legally allow those. It's an unfair. It's not fair. That's not an evidence. I responded that I wasn't legally allowed to offer those, and now he wants to twist that I'm playing games with the jury.
It's legally in evidence. This honorable court is not going to do anything illegal. You know, we get accused, defense lawyers, of smoke and mirrors. Where's been the smoke and where's been the mirrors? You've been in this courtroom. You've seen it. And then David Rangel, he was their 10th witness. Daniel's cousin. You know, Butterworth kept pounding on him. This is true. This is true. Isn't it true that this is... David Rangel was very consistent. Daniel told me that. But I also knew he was joking. I also knew it wasn't true. It didn't happen. This is your statement. Yes, it is. That's one of my statements. Because we know Marcus threw one of them away. But this is what's in that statement. Yes, it is. And it's true that it's there. Yeah, it's true that that's what I wrote. It's true that's what's typed. It's true that's my signature. That doesn't make it true. Just because they say it 50 times doesn't mean it's true. David Rangel was very clear. He was terrorized. This young boy, part of the problem we have is you see men testifying. This young boy is a year older than when Marcus got a hold of him. What do you think Detective Marcus did to this young boy? What do you think he did? What did he say? You're a pretty white boy that's going to get raped in prison. I know, first he accused him. I know you did it. I know you did it. I don't know what you're talking about. I know you did it. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you better tell me what you know or you're going to go to prison. You're going away for life. So what is David? I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you know something. My cousin called me, but he was just joking. No. We're not talking about the jokes. And then he starts typing it up. And since Marcus knows what to put in the report, that's why he types it up. And he tells David, this is what you're going to put. And he writes it out. You know, they tried to make a big deal with David Rangel. Well, are you really still friendly with the Villegas family? I mean, you threw your cousin under the bus. Well, you know, a year after Daniel was accused of this, yeah, they have a good relationship. And you know why? Because both of these families know what that detective did to these boys and the other victims. Both of these families know. It's how can you blame these kids for what he said? In the hands of a homicide detective that is unethical and immoral. How can you do that? David Rangel said, does Daniel have a vehicle back then? No. Did Rodney? Did Marcos? No. He barely owned a bicycle. But where was the vehicle? You know what's interesting? Like they said a couple of hours later, when Officer Reveles shows up, I asked him, did you see a black Monte Carlo? See a vehicle? No. In the home? At Daniel Villegas' home? Didn't see one. And he had been at the crime scene. He had already been at the Electric Street when there was shots fired at another home. So the boys are out there wondering what's going on. They don't hide. They don't run. They're there. David Rangel was threatened with murder, with capital murder. David Rangel was scared. He told you, he says he relives it. You could see it in his face. There's no doubt what that detective did to him. Their 11th witness is Officer Reveles, that he went to the scene for 5 or 10 minutes. Several hours later, he went to 5700 Ram. He said the initial call came in from a shots fired that they had seen a yellow Thunderbird leaving the scene. I don't know what sinister spin they're trying to place on that. It just is a ludicrous. They're making these quantum leaps, and they want to take you along for a ride in those quantum leaps. Said he didn't see a Monte Carlo at the home of Daniel Villegas. And their 12th witness, Angelica Hernandez, she said she was 15 years old. You think about this. 15 years old, goes to North Park Mall, she's with her friend, and 3 boys come up. A light-skinned guy, and he was the one she remembered, the light-skinned guy. He was very talkative, and he said, I'm from B&E gang, and we did the shooting. And then she talked to him, didn't know Daniel Villegas, had never seen Daniel Villegas, okay? And she got scared and went to the movies. Didn't report it, said she told her mother, but she didn't report it to the police. She said because she saw, according to the prosecutors, well, she saw that somebody got arrested the next day, so she didn't report it. He got arrested? Well, would you have called the police and say, hey, I can help you identify it? I had somebody that admitted to it. 20 years go by. 20 years go by. And then she sees publicity, she sees it in the news, and she sees this man, not the 16-year-old boy, and then reaches out to the prosecutor. You know, it may have been the guy that came up to me when I was 15 years old, 20 years ago, at North Park Mall. She didn't identify him in this courtroom. She didn't even identify him from a picture of what he looked like when he was 16. She couldn't remember anything. You know, my wife accuses me all the time of not remembering people's faces, you know, after a few days, a few weeks, a few months. 20 years later, how much does a 16-year-old boy change in 20 years? I mean, use your common sense. How much does a person change in 20 years? And when she saw the news and saw this man in the news, well, I think maybe he may have come up to me. And the only thing she said was, that person that came up to her didn't say his name. Was because he's light-skinned? God help us if that's one of the MOs for being a suspect. And she said one thing that was interesting when Mr. Valenzuela was questioning her. She's not sure if she remembered it herself or if she remembered it from the news. That's what she said. That was what she said. She wasn't sure if she remembered it herself or if it was from the news. How can you rely on that testimony? There was no identification in this courtroom. Their 13th witness was James Nance. You know, and we heard a lot of information from Mr. Nance about the cells, about the county, about where you know, how the sun porch looks, and how people can go here and there, where they can be positioned, and how inmates can be here. And we heard about Simone Kirk that was positioned in some cell block, and where Daniel was, where the juveniles are, and we heard all of that. What evidentiary value did it have? It didn't have any evidentiary value. Because he didn't tell us anything else. And what we did learn is that the information in those records at the jail about the locations of where you are and when you can be transferred are not accurate, are not reliable. Just because it says they're on the second floor, it doesn't mean they're on the second floor. It could have been entered that they were going, and then for some reason they didn't get there, or they could put them on the second floor and then record it later, so that the time is not accurate and the location is not accurate. That's what their witness told you. How can you rely on information that's not accurate? Because their whole case has been fictional. They've been dealing in fiction, not fact. That was with Officer Nance, their 13th witness. Their 14th witness, Consuelo Padilla, she said she worked at a Chevron station, but she was very honest. Very honest parole officer out of California. I could not identify who it is, and I can't even say this is the person. That's not in evidence because that wasn't trustworthy, it wasn't reliable. She didn't have anything to add. They brought a witness from California that's unreliable, that's not trustworthy, that gave you zero evidence for what? try to make you think, maybe it was him. And as we talked about in closing, in Bodire, preponderance of the evidence, clear and convincing and beyond a reasonable doubt, do you think it's possible? You think somebody could have, might have, even if you thought somebody probably did it, that didn't reach the level of beyond a reasonable doubt? They're trying to lower that standard to the point that it's insulting. And their star witness, Oscar Gomez, the tough guy. What did Oscar tell us? Oscar said, you know, that Detective Sanchez, told me if I didn't tell him what he wanted to hear, he was going to throw my ass in prison. That you need to save and think about your own ass. That's what Oscar Gomez told you. He said, I told him, he hadn't said anything to do. No. You're going to do, and you're going to say what I tell you to. And right now the cameras are off and I'm not recording your statement. He goes, but this is what you better do. You better think about yourself. Because I will put you away if you don't tell me what I want to hear. And you know what? They played that little clip. Did you see how scared he looked? Look at the face of us. Did you see what he looked like when they put him on? Even on the camera, when they finally did turn it on, you see how scared he looked? It is incredible to me. And think about this. This happened in 2014, okay? 2014. 21 years later, they talked to Oscar Gomez. Now, Oscar Gomez isn't a 16-year-old boy. You saw that man with the tattoos on his skull, on his head, on his face, all over. We didn't see his arm, for the arms that we could see. Been around. What did he tell you? Told them whatever they want. I told whatever that detective wanted to do. If that detective did that to that individual that was sitting, that man, what's he going to do to these boys? You think about that. What's he going to do to these boys? Do you want your boys to be in the hands of a detective that can do what he did to Oscar? And then they tell him, and don't you talk to the defense. You better not talk to the defense. And when I turn the camera on, you better say exactly what I want you to say. That's what he told you. And about a week later, Oscar's got a conscience. Contacted me. That's what he told you. You know who this man was. Yeah? When I got the statement from him, Oscar, let me talk to you. And I noticed in the recording, in the video statement that they took of him, the detective makes a comment that I caught when we were talking earlier.
Hearsay. This video wasn't entered. I have the jury has no idea of whether he's telling the truth or not. He's arguing evidence outside of the record.
Oscar testified that he remembered reviewing the video in my office, and there was a part that said, when I was talking to you earlier. And that's when I asked him, were you talking to him before this video? Come on, for 2 hours? What did he tell you during the 2 hours? And then he spills his guts. And he tells us what Detective Sanchez did to him. And they didn't call Detective Sanchez to tell you it's not true. In fact, they didn't call one detective. Think about that. Capital murder case. Now, one detective was called. We don't have an obligation. We don't have a burden. It's not our job to prove it to them. But those boys named every detective that abused them. And that's the evidence you have. And now, one of those detectives was man enough to show up and try to defend themselves. It's offensive. And it's dangerous. And if it happens to one of your children or one of your loved ones, you can feel like Daniel and Daniel's family. That's the evidence. That's all of their witnesses. That's who they called. Downstairs, on the first floor, is a statue of Lady Justice, if you happen to see her. It's one of the few Lady Justices in the country that is not blindfolded. Because we've all heard that justice should be blind. Justice should be equal for everybody. Why our Lady Justice is not blindfolded, I can't answer that. But that's what we have in there. But even this Lady Justice, the soul of Lady Justice was corrupted in this courtroom by what was tried in this courtroom, by the evidence that was put on. If that statue could cry tears, it would cry tears of shame of what she heard in this courtroom. If you're wondering where Daniel was, that's reasonable doubt. If somebody asks you, so what happened that night? If you're not sure, that's reasonable doubt. We have no physical evidence, no DNA evidence, no fingerprints, no scientific evidence, no forensic evidence, no eyewitness identification. You know, when Daniel was telling what, you know, why would somebody, we talked about him, why would somebody say what they say? Why would somebody say something that wasn't true? You know, he said he was a jokester, you know. Daniel said, oh yeah, I used a shotgun. We know it wasn't a shotgun. Physical evidence doesn't match that. You know, we talked about this in Bodire. In the criminal justice system, should a person be convicted, sent away for life to prison on evidence? Each and every one of you said evidence, not gossip. Each and every one of you said you were going to require evidence, not gossip. This isn't about chisme. This is about evidence, or the lack of evidence that they have. It's required, and it's in the charge. It's in the charge from His Honor, his instruction to you. The prosecution's proof must exclude all reasonable doubt concerning the defendant's guilt. All reasonable doubt. And you must use your collective wisdom and your collective common sense. All persons are presumed to be innocent. We talked about that. And no person may be convicted of an offense unless each and every element of the offense is proved beyond a reasonable doubt. You know, each and every one of you are tasked with a very important job. Each and every one of you have a tremendous burden, because you must look at yourself in the mirror when you leave here. You must be comfortable and feel good about your verdict. And you must feel that you have fulfilled your obligation as a juror. We talked about in the jury system, and His Honor told you that in this great country there are many rights, but two sacred rights. The right to vote and the right to sit in judgment of another human being. And we talked about that. That the 12 of you that are sitting in judgment of another human being hold the highest honor that a person can hold in the face of this earth. And it's an awesome responsibility. And I have watched you, and you all have taken your job very seriously with a tremendous sacrifice of being away from your loved ones and your other obligations to make sure justice is served. It's not your fault that they don't have evidence. It's not Daniel's fault that they don't have evidence. Those are the facts. We talked about beyond reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt requires you to be certain. Fairness requires you to be sure. To be sure. And justice requires you to be right. Do not do anything that does violence to your conscience. Stick to your convictions, whatever it is. Whatever it is. You each are individual judges. You have a duty to deliberate with each other, but don't compromise your conviction. You each have a moral compass. Stick to your moral compass. Stick to your moral compass. Don't let it be corrupted. Don't let it be influenced. It's very natural for a jury, when we have one dead body, much less two dead bodies, to somehow try to put a closure to it. But it would be a tragedy if you turn Daniel's joke into his worst nightmare. That's not your fault. He did that. He turned his joke into his worst nightmare. And he's had to live with that for over a quarter of a century. You've been living with it for a week, and it might feel like a quarter of a century for you. But he's lived with it for a quarter of a century. I have to tell you something. If during the course of representing Daniel, if I have said or done anything to offend you, I apologize for offending you. I make no apology for representing Daniel. It has been a privilege to represent that young man. It's been a privilege to know his parents, his family. Because I have seen that this is not a case of human error. This has been a case of human manipulation by the members of the constabulary. And because their ego is so big, and they will never accept that they made a mistake and that they got it wrong, that they want you to bail them out. Because they're not big enough to say, we made a mistake. We should have followed the evidence. You know, you can't explain anything. The problem with being innocent is you can't explain everything because you weren't there and you don't know. You know, we come to the part of the trial where it's the worst part of the trial for me. Because I know I have Daniel's life in my hands, and soon we're going to turn that over to you. And I've been protecting him as best as I can for as long as I've been able to. But when I sit down, I can't come back up and do a rebuttal to what this excellent prosecutor will do. Because she's a very good prosecutor. But even she can't get you to beyond a reasonable doubt. She can't overcome that burden. So when I sit down over there and I have to sit on my hands, because if I had an opportunity to respond, I would. But the law doesn't allow me to, and His Honor won't allow me to. I just have to sit there. I need you to think about how would Mr. Spencer respond if he had that opportunity? What would he say? Because I can't do that. You know, this case reminds me a little bit of what they've done. It's like the gentleman that he's intoxicated and he goes around and he shoots arrows and it hits a bullseye every time. All over town. Bullseye, bullseye, bullseye. You start to wonder, well, how did that happen? So then somebody decides to look, to see. And what they find, when they start following him, they find that when he shoot a bullseye, when he shoot an arrow, he'd go to where the arrow was, and then he'd paint the bullseye. Like when they hit the target. That's what they've done. That's what they've done. And you know, as much as they try to blame John and Bella, all he's done to try to help, try to find the truth, like he said, Me and Freddie Bonilla. What did Jesse Hernandez? I didn't know John Mandela. He came, knocked on my door. He said, I want to talk to you. Because I like to talk to you. What did you see? Had a private investigator that was a retired police officer that did the investigation that the police did not do. That knew what should have been done. All he's doing is trying to get to the truth. John Mandela's like that man that followed. He was the guy that found out that they were just painting bullseye. And it bothered him. And he wanted to do something about it. And they want to make something nefarious about it. They want to somehow say, well, he was bribing witness. That is ridiculous. No evidence of that. Jesse told you. Not for sale. Justice is not for sale in this courtroom. And just because they say it doesn't mean it's true. Abraham Lincoln once asked a man, how many legs does a dog have? The man said 4. And Abraham Lincoln told the man, suppose we call the tail a leg. How many legs does a dog have now? And the man said 5. And Abraham Lincoln said, no. No matter what you call the tail, a dog still only has 4 legs. No matter what they've tried to tell you what the evidence does and has shown, it has not. It has not. Don't do for them what the evidence has failed to do. Stick to your conviction. Whatever it is. I will try this case again if I have to. But we don't want to. I'm going to ask you one thing. Daniel's been waiting more than 25 years for justice. Try not to keep him waiting any longer. Godspeed with your verdict.